Breaking news in college football, where Georgia jumps to number 3 in the latest AP Top 25 poll ahead of the SEC title game against Alabama. The Bulldogs move up a spot behind the 2 remaining unbeatens, Ohio State at 1 and Indiana at 2. Those 2 will play for the Big Ten championship. Also, Oregon and Texas Tech leap into the top 5, while Ole Miss, surrounded by all that Lane Kiffin saga, stands pat at 6 here in the AP poll. Texas A&M dropping 4 spots to number 7 after suffering their first loss of the season, while Oklahoma, Notre Dame, and Alabama finish out the top 10. Playoff hopefuls, Miami, Vanderbilt, they are 12 and 13. James Madison is the highest ranked Group of 5 school at number 19. A reminder, the penultimate CFP rankings will be revealed on Tuesday night, and the 12-team college football playoff field will be announced 1 week from today. Few more in the top 25. The final 5 schools. Mizzou going from unranked to ranked after a win over Arkansas. You've also got Tulane and Navy in there out of the G5. Let's welcome in Damien Harris and Brad Crawford to react to the latest AP Top 25 poll. But guys, as we always do on Sunday, we're kind of projecting forward to see what the college football playoff will do, since those rankings ultimately will be very important as it pertains to the postseason. So, guys, we've been waiting all day long for some big Lane Kiffin news to drop. We've had little trickles here and there, but ultimately the question as it pertains to what we're doing here is, what will the committee do with a potential Kiffin-less Ole Miss team? What do you think they should do?
This is a tough one. Now, initially, when we talked about if it's just Lane Kiffin, the head coach, what do you do? That's a totally different conversation than what we have to have right now, because Lane Kiffin, as we've heard, is threatening to take his entire staff with him. Now, when you take a head coach, obviously there are guys on your staff that can serve as interim. They can have the same type of control of the locker room or feel for what you want to do as a team. When you get rid of the entire staff, or if you take the entire staff with you, if you're Lane Kiffin, what do you have left with these players? They're coachless. Then you have to worry about the buy-in of the players, how seriously they take this opportunity. If Lane is trying to poach and take some of those players with him to LSU, if that ultimately ends up being what happens, I think if Lane has it his way and he heads to Baton Rouge and he takes his staff with him, unfortunately, and I don't even know a word to describe it other than unfortunate, you have to punish these kids by leaving Ole Miss out of the playoffs.
Oh, leaving Ole Miss out is a bold statement, Damien. I think Ole Miss's seeding will be docked. Perhaps the Rebels lose a first-round home game. But after finishing 11-1, man, you can't penalize these players that much and take an 11-win SEC team, one of the best teams in the country, let's face it, and take them completely out of the bracket. I think we're going to see Ole Miss, because of this strange scenario we haven't yet seen in an expanded playoff situation. I do think the committee will dock the Rebels. I think Ole Miss likely drops from 6 to maybe 8 or number 9. But if some of these players enter the transfer portal, then that does create a domino effect in which the committee would say, well, wait a minute, not only is the coaching staff gone, but the players who got this program there are gone too. So I'm going to wait and see if the dust settles and if Trinidad Chambliss, Keywan Lacey, some of those key players for the Ole Miss offense, if they bounce too, because if that's the case, the committee has a decision to make Tuesday night.
Yeah, and our Matt Zenitz is reporting that Ole Miss is not expected to have Lane Kiffin coach them during the playoff. But the seeding question is a very interesting one. So they might not kick them completely out of the bracket, but as it stands, the Rebels are currently at number 5, which is a very advantageous position because you end up playing number 12, which is likely the group of 5 representative. So we'll continue to see if there is any impact there. I'm sure we'll be talking all about it on Tuesday. But there's also another conundrum, Damien and Brad, and that is the ACC, because now 7-5 Duke will be playing for a potential ACC championship spot. Brad, I thought we were done with the whole chaos scenario and leaving the ACC out, but are we?
Yeah, we talked about a few weeks ago that if 10 or 11 things happen down the stretch, we could be at this point in time, and here we are, 7-win. Like you said, Duke team has a chance that if the Blue Devils beat Virginia next week, I think the ACC is going to be left out of the 12-team bracket altogether. That would be just pure chaos and disappointment for Jim Phillips in that conference. the important thing here, too, is James Madison. If the Dukes win the Sun Belt, then you're going to have likely 2 G5 representatives, conference champions, get those 11 and 12 final seeds, with the other one going to North Texas or Tulane, whoever wins the American. So, Virginia, you are holding the ACC flag. If you want to get the ACC in the 12-team bracket, you've got to beat Duke in what's essentially a home game for the Blue Devils next weekend in Charlotte.
Yeah, no, Brad is absolutely right. I mean, when you want to talk about chaos, you want to talk about parity, the ACC has become what the Big 12 was last year, and that's essentially eliminating themselves from even having a single representative. And I know that Brad just talked about Virginia. They're the sole hope for the ACC to get a team, a bid into the college football playoffs. I'm looking at SMU. They had an opportunity. They controlled their own destiny. If they had made it to the conference championship, if they had won the ACC championship, they would have been the representatives. But again, the ACC is full of carnage. SMU goes down. Now it's up to Virginia. But I fully agree with Brad. If Duke wins the ACC championship, the ACC won't get a bid, and I don't think that they deserve a bid.
Yeah, and for people wondering, well, why don't they just put in another at-large that's more deserving? They do have to put in the top 5 conference champions, so that is what opens the door for 2 group of 5 teams to come in, because there's probably some Longhorns fans that are watching right now going, Brad, why don't you put us in at 9-3? We have 3 top 10 victories.
Don't do it, Brad. Don't do it, Brad.
How should the committee treat Texas after upsetting Texas A&M?
Unfortunately, I said last week on this show, Emily, that even if Texas beats an unbeaten Texas A&M on Friday night during rivalry weekend, there's no path unless 3 or 4 teams ahead of Texas in the rankings get beat. And it just didn't happen. You had Miami beat Pittsburgh. You had Alabama triumphant win late in the Iron Bowl. BYU won. Those were some teams that Texas needed help from. Didn't happen. Vanderbilt also won, by the way. So Texas is a part of a 4 or 5 team bubble group right now. And with no conference championship to play for next weekend, Steve Sarkisian and the Longhorns are likely headed to the Citrus Bowl in Orlando. I know they have some good wins, but Texas has itself to blame. Not only does that loss at Florida stick out, but they had to come back from 17 down to beat Mississippi State. They gave up 512 yards to Arkansas, which was 0-8 in the SEC this season, and then lost by 25 points against Georgia, who barely beat Georgia Tech this weekend. So a lot of results did not go in Texas' favor.
Brad, you want to know what we call that little bubble that Texas is sitting in right now? Our own Mackenzie Brooks likes to call that the airplane standby list. And unfortunately for Texas, there are just other teams that are first in line or second in line, and Texas is they're just too far behind. And those 2 losses that Brad just mentioned, obviously those were bad losses. But I want to sit up here and say something. Steve Sarkisian pounding the table and campaigning for Texas to get in, and using the fact that they scheduled Ohio State in week 1 as leverage, it doesn't work when you lose. So you win that game, then we have an argument. But just because you weren't afraid of a tougher opponent and they still beat you, you don't get grace, you don't get favor just because you weren't afraid of the big bad Ohio State Buckeyes. Well, they still beat you. That's another loss, and that brings down your resume and puts you in the situation that Texas is in right now.
Yeah, and I love that Brad mentioned that Mississippi State game too. This Texas team could very well be a 4-loss team if they didn't have incredible magic down the stretch against the Bulldogs. On the other side of things, Texas A&M loses that game. So how do we view the Aggies now?
I mean, the Aggies are still a good football team. I mean, Texas has proved recently that they are playing at one of the higher levels in all of college football, but we can't compare that to their resume because their resume is what it is. Texas A&M got beat by a good Texas team. Texas defense played really, really well. They limited Marcel Reed and what he was able to do. Arch Manning played like what we expected Arch Manning to play like all season long. So I think it was just a perfect storm. I wouldn't knock the Aggies too much. Obviously, they're not going to be playing for a conference championship. They're more than likely not going to get that first round bye, but they're still going to be in a good position. I think our own Mackenzie Brooks had them somewhere around 6 or 7 seeds. So that's not a bad spot for them. They're still a good team, and everything that they want is still in front of them.
Yeah, not many teams get to lose on rivalry weekend and the consolation prize be a first-round home game in the playoff.
Right.
And that's what the Aggies are going to get. I mean, Mackenzie's right. I've got Texas A&M. I think it's number 6 right now behind Oregon and just ahead of Ole Miss because of that mystery right now with Lane Kiffin's situation. But Mike Elko's team has some great wins. They came back from behind, beat Notre Dame on the road earlier this season, was down 27 points at halftime this month to South Carolina, won that game, beat Arkansas on the road too. So this is a team that is battle-tested, but maybe compared to some other SEC teams with better wins, Texas A&M's a squad that has taken full advantage this fall of a somewhat favorable slate in what I consider college football's toughest conference.
It tells you something that losing one SEC game was not enough to make it to the SEC championship game, because they did not have any of the tiebreakers. But ultimately, Texas A&M, we expect to be in the field. Brad?
I was going to just real quick blurb, just because you had said something about, one loss gets you out of the SEC championship. Texas A&M is having a better year than they've had in the last 10, 15 years since Johnny Manziel was there. Vanderbilt, they're in a better place than their program has ever been. Ole Miss, they've lost one game this year, and somehow, some way, it's Alabama and Georgia for the SEC championship. Like, how does this happen? This is the third time in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
And look at how good the SEC has been, how well some of these teams have played, and yet, like you said, one loss in conference play that eliminates your chances for a conference championship.
It's crazy how that happens. Once again, Georgia and Alabama. We'll get to that in a bit, but you mentioned Vanderbilt. Brad, watching this team play, decisive is putting it mildly based on what they did to their rival Tennessee yesterday. Is this a college football playoff team?
I think Vanderbilt is worthy of getting to that 12-team bracket, but it's not going to happen. Vanderbilt's first top 25 team within the committee's poll was Tennessee, and they beat them. So they don't. The previous ranked wins Vanderbilt has this season: South Carolina, LSU, Missouri. All those teams flatlined late. They beat a Missouri team without Bo Pribula at quarterback, who got hurt in the first half. They were down 4 touchdowns to Texas. I know that was a close game at the end, but Vanderbilt, this is a great year, a monumental step in the right direction for Clark Lee. I'm happy those in Nashville signed him to a long-term extension, but just be happy that you're going to get one of the SEC's best bowl bids. But as far as the playoffs concerned, no, Vanderbilt hasn't done enough. They lost their 2 toughest games of the year at Alabama, and at Texas, and that's where the cookie crumbles.
Yeah, I agree with Brad. I mean, everybody cheers for the story. Everybody loves the story of Diego Pavia and how he's changed the culture of this team, what Clark Lee has done, how Vanderbilt has risen in the ranks of the SEC hierarchy. We're all fans of that. We need to just be fans of that. They're not a college football playoff team. I hate to say it. And that Texas game really stood out to me, because that was before Arch Manning really hit his stride. This wasn't the Texas that we saw against Texas A&M. And Vanderbilt struggled mightily. Diego Pavia struggled mightily. And, even yesterday, didn't play that well to start the game. Obviously, I know he had a big game, a big comeback. They ended up winning by a lot of points. But we just need to cheer on the Diego Pavia story. Hopefully he gets enough love to get him to New York City. Like, that's really what this season is about for Vanderbilt. Climbing the SEC tiers, getting Diego Pavia to New York City.
Yeah, they have already made so much history. The only power conference school that had never had 10 wins in the regular season, and now they've got it. So, yes, it is a fantastic story.
Yeah.
I know in Nashville they want to end this fantastic story in the college football playoff, but looking unlikely. Guys, thank you so much for breaking that down. Tuesday will be a very interesting discussion. Some more notable dates, though. December 20th is when the first round of the college football playoff starts. Quarters, New Year's Eve and day. Semis, January 8th and 9th. And the national championship is set for January 19th.